let's get the recording started. So, okay, again, let's start over here. Welcome, everybody, and it's good that we can come together tonight and each and every night on Wednesdays here, and wish that we can get together for different circumstances, but unfortunately, most of us here are struggling with our grief, struggling with life events, because one of the things I believe is life events causes us to become disempowered. We lose focus in life, we lose our direction, and it just sucks the power out of us, so that, you know, and it disempowers us because we're putting our focus on something else than putting our focus on what we need to be, and so we lose our power. So this call tonight is we're going to ask this question. We're going to ask a lot of other questions, but we're going to really look at a couple key things to create a transformation, a small shift in your state of mind, and we're going to go over a few things here as far as state of mind and everything. But the thing here that I want to get across to you is, this is something that you can do. Okay, it's not hard to do. You probably do it every day. You just don't realize that you do it. Okay, so have you ever felt that you just can't get there from here? That's kind of the question and theme tonight. Because on the slide it shows a person out in the fog, that fog, surrounded. So if you were to blindfold yourself and go out, somebody would take you out and drop you off, let's say at dusk or dawn or something, and so there's no sunlight or anything to kind of indicate which directions, east and west, and all that good stuff. Let me ask you a question. Would you know where you're at? Would you be able to find your direction? Would you be able to get to where you want to go? That's a little bit what I'm talking about here, because I believe our life events, for example, my life event that really created the change and the shift for me was the loss of my daughter. And then 8 years later, because my wife and I grieved differently, 8 years later, she came home and told me she didn't love me anymore, and we got a divorce. And so that started the whole grieving process over, because now there's a death of a marriage. And so 8 years didn't really progress a whole, very far in my process as far as my grieving was concerned. And but with that being said, there's one step here I kind of want to indicate to you, and that is, you've got to ask yourself, some questions. In previous calls, I've talked about there's three questions that I want to ask, and that the first question is where have you been, where are you now, and where you're going. For this purpose tonight, it's not so much where you've been. Most of us know where we've been, and as I said before, that third question, where are you going, that's the one that people have a problem answering, because it's where our focus is at. Okay, so with that being said, what's it all about? Okay, what are you asking for? And what's you're stuck in your grief, and what I'm talking about here really is being, while you're stuck in your grief, you're asking some questions, and these are questions that kind of, like, I would say, go through your mind like a video replay. And you find yourself, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and in my case, 20 years later, these same questions going through your mind and going through, and you feel stuck. You just, you're lost in that fog. Where do I go? Where do you go? So, with that being said, what are you asking? You're stuck in your grief. You're asking, I miss them. How can I go on with life? How long will my grief last? What do I do, or what do I have to do? No one understands me. That's a big one. I'm alone. Well, that's another big one that people feel. I myself feel the same way. I've had these emotions, and I've had I've had so many others. And I want to refer to these as emotions, not so much as questions, because one of the things is it's how do you focus on something, in your life? So if you miss them, you're focusing on missing them. How do you go on? You're focusing on that, and then you start putting all these things together. in your life, and you find yourself becoming very depressed, very down and out, very not wanting to get up, not wanting to do anything, and so so what I want to do is we're going to ask the question here, and we're going to focus on the topic, which is focus. Okay, the slide here on the slide deck on our call here shows on our PowerPoint, question mark, stair step going up, but what's at the top? What are you going? So we're going to focus on just that, the topic of what should we be focusing on? Okay, and here's the thing, and this is an very interesting question. So how do you focus on something that is pleasing in your life when all you have is something that is not so pleasing? You don't feel happy. You don't feel, you feel lost in the fog. You feel, you just, how do I get to that point where I can feel, pleasing or happy or smiling or feel good, and then maybe be able to string more of those together one day after another, and but how do you do that? Okay, we're going to cover that. That's one of the key things that I want to talk to you about, because something that you focus on, you believe it to be true. Okay, so if it's something that you feel is true, all right, and this is something I want you to understand. If it's something that you feel is true, it's I have focused on this because you feel it's true. All other people focus on the same feelings, and they behave the same way, and so it must be true. And I must feel the same way as they do. Now, we all know that everybody grieves differently. Everybody handles the situation differently, right? So when we talk about all the people, there's been people that are further ahead of us in our journey and where we're at, and there's people that are not as far as long as we are, okay? But for myself, and I can only speak for myself, it was over 20 years of my life where, I was doing okay from time to time, and I was feeling pretty good, and I had good days and I had bad days, but, my focus was on that event, that day. I focused constantly on that day, and how or what I didn't do or what I did do, and then everybody around me was telling me, well, it's been 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or they've been through something similar, and I'm looking at them, and I'm basing how well they're doing in their grief, and wow, they lost their loved one or their child or whatever. In my case, it was a child, and they lost their child 2 years ago. I lost mine 5 years ago, or 10. It's been 24 years, but I look at them and I say they're so much further along, and so you focus. So I'm focusing on how other people are feeling, because if that's the way they are, then it must be true. What I'm feeling, makes it true in my mind and how I feel, which is going to make me behave a certain way. If we focus, everybody's heard that saying, if you focus on something long enough, that's what you get, right? So if you focus on something, that's what you're going to have. And it doesn't have to be that way, okay? But in my case, it was that way. So I was stuck. I was lost in that fog for so long. Okay, so so we have two directions we can go. We can go towards hope, okay, or we can stay or go back or turn back and take steps back and go to despair. So I want you to think about your emotions, okay, and I want you to think about your emotions being your GPS. So let's change our focus, okay. So let's change our focus. So we all have a navigation system or GPS. So let's talk a little bit about how that works and how that pertains to how our emotional GPS, okay, our direction, how we feel. So so this is where the question is, where you've been. It doesn't matter where you've been, how long ago. It doesn't. None of that really plays into part with this question here. So we all know how a GPS works. So you start from where you are right now. You put in a destination of where you want to go, okay? And that destination for your GPS, for your navigation system, for your car, your vehicle, okay, that becomes the focus of your GPS. That's all your GPS is going to focus on is the direction of where you want to go, okay? So your GPS will tell you to proceed to the highlighted route, right? It's going to tell you to go to the highlighted route and and then when you get off track, it's going to remind you to get back on track. So it's going to remind you to go, get back on your highlighted route. And when possible, you get too far off a track, when possible, it's going to remind you to make a U-turn, a legal, right? The little voice comes on and says, make a legal U-turn when possible, okay? Well, our emotional GPS is the same way, okay? When, our emotions kind of direct our steps through life, especially after losing a loved one, okay? And so it's going to let you know when your emotional GPS is going to let you know when you're off track. But what we're focusing on with our emotional GPS is the event. We're focusing on even years later. I learned I was focusing on the event, the loss of my daughter. I was focusing on my divorce 8 years later after that. That's where my focus was directed. So during that period of time, when my focus was directed towards that, that's all I thought about. I made a mess of things. I lost my, marriage. Lost my business. I went bankrupt. I lost relationships with friends. I lost relationships with family. Found a lot of fault, and I kept going back and blaming the death of my daughter for everything. And I felt that was the problem that I suffered with, and I didn't realize that it changed me. So one of the things I learned through all the life lessons, and this really didn't come to me until almost 20 years later, is when I was driving truck and I used GPSs all the time to get me all over the country, then I realized that, all I need for my life is a GPS. All I need for my life is an emotional GPS on how to start at a set point to get me to where I want to go. So, so when we look at, our emotional GPS, what's your emotional state of mind right now? Earlier I talked a little bit about state of mind, okay? Your state of mind, basically, I've got a 5-step process when I work with somebody, and one of the key areas I work with is state of mind. Got to determine what's your state of mind at your present point, okay? And if you look at state of mind in all the different states that you make, and we have, everybody knows about the stages of grief, right? The 5 stages of grief. The one thing that I know my therapists and my counselors failed to tell me is, or what I felt in the books I read, I felt that what they taught me was, once I work through those 5 stages of grief, I'm done. I'm healed. I'm better. Problem is those stages come around over and over. It's just like a GPS. You're doing a trip, and those little stages of grief are little stops along your way. You're going to stop at anger. You're going to stop at depression. You're going to stop at denial. You're going to stop in hate and all that other stuff. I can't. The different stages have left me all of a sudden, but those are like little stops. There's no set time frame you spend at any one destination in your emotional GPS. Okay, so while you're going through that process, think of it this way. But your emotional GPS we're talking about here is your state of mind, where you are right now. That's where you're going to set your address. That's where you're going to kind of say, this is where I am right now. But for the purpose of this talk, and for our the people that are online also watching this, and for you people watching me talk here on Facebook, I want you to, we're going to start with usually by the time I'm speaking with somebody or they come to me and ask for help, it's usually later, several years later after loss, okay? And because they feel stuck, they feel lost in a fog. And usually they're in some form or another of depression, okay? So you're feeling depressed. This we can say is your starting point for your emotional GPS, let's say, okay? You're depressed right now, so how do you go from feeling depressed to going to where you want to go? Well, I meet a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm talking years later, 5, 10, 15 years later, that wind up back on, or at some point in time wind up on antidepressant drugs, things like that. That can throw people into a fog. And I was on antidepressant drugs for a while, but in the first several years, and also again when I went through my divorce. One of the things I'll tell you with the divorce and the drugs at that point in time was one of the best diet programs going. I lost a lot of weight, during that period of time with the depression, because I didn't have an appetite, didn't feel like eating, but I also emotionally and physically and mentally felt terrible. It was hard to focus on, what it was. And then until I really made that decision that things had to change. Things have to change. But one of the things I always said is I'm not the same person I was. And one of the things we're going to go over next week, we're going to talk about state of mind. We're going to talk about empowerment, disempowerment, empowerment next week, okay? Because I'm touching on this a little bit here today, so I feel it's important to continue the conversation with that next week, because one of the things is in this process, I'll just go ahead and let you know, of trying to get your power back and in being empowered is the idea of forgiveness, number one, and to release it, okay? We will talk more about this next week. I don't want to get too sidetracked here, because some of this kind of goes with that too. So this training and next week's training will kind of go hand in hand a little bit with that. So just kind of a little heads up for that one next week. But anyways, we have our emotional GPS set right now, and we currently are in our state of mind is that we feel rather depressed. Maybe not full-blown depression, we just feel depressed and sad. May not be, and we're not going to, maybe an overall depression, or it could be just depressed about one particular subject, topic, or how you're feeling right now, okay? So what's next, okay? What's our next stop? Where are we going from here? Well, the first step on your trail of depression, okay, and this is something that I think you might feel that is very doable, okay, and that's anger, okay? You feel angry, all right? I know I was extremely angry for years, and not angry at one particular person, angry with myself, angry with, the people at the pool, the lifeguards, doctors, all the mistakes that we had found out that was made, and things that weren't done, and then things that were done, and and so that's going to be our first stop. So let's say we plan a GPS trip in our vehicle, and we're going to go from here to, I live in Ohio, so we're going to go from Ohio to California. It's going to take us 3.5 days. And I know for myself, when I want to go someplace, I want to just snap my finger, be like I Dream of Jeannie or whatever, and just blink and go there. But, unfortunately we can't do that. But, I wanted to make a shift, if I ask you, what could you be angry at right now? I bet you each and every one of you here and here know what you can be mad at. I can get mad at my dog real easy when he poops on the floor, right? But, but think about it. When you are feeling depressed, when you feel depressed and sad about your situation, or you're over, and you just can't see no end to it, get angry at something, okay? Whatever is bothering you, it will be gone, okay? At least temporarily, we'll say, okay? So, so if I look at this, you might say it's doable. You can do that. You can get mad and you can get angry. So when you're depressed, you can't get a breath of fresh air. You ever feel that way when you're depressed? I know times that I've been depressed, it's, just being able to get a breath of fresh air is really hard. You can make that shift from feeling depressed to anger. It's not that hard. Okay? I could get mad at the person that ran the pool that day. because they let too many people into the pool for the amount of lifeguards. So I can get angry at them. Now, in the end, it doesn't really do any good, okay? But I could get angry with them, okay? If you ask, I want to ask you the question: do you feel a little bit better? Now that you have something that you can focus on. So if I can take and focus my anger on something, then I feel a little bit better. Okay? Just as blame feels better than guilt. When you feel guilty about something, and if you stay in that state of mind of guilt will then, sooner or later, you're going to feel guilty and you're going to blame yourself, okay? But when you feel guilty, then, that's another emotional state of mind that is like depression. It's, you just feel bad all over. But if I blame something, now I can blame something and put blame onto something. Now, whether or not it's worthy to blame, in my case, I blamed myself, and I think most parents that lose children, regardless of the situation, we feel responsible in some way, so we do blame ourselves. It's a natural thing to do, okay? And but I want you to understand, that we're not going to stay angry forever, okay? And we're not going to feel guilty forever. We're not going to blame ourselves forever, all right? It's just a stop along the way, okay? And you can change your anger. You can change anger to, I can direct it to my dog. I can direct it to my kids. I can be angry at the house. The roof leaks. I can be angry with the contractor for screwing up the job. There's a lot of things I can be angry about, okay? Only thing I would suggest is don't act out your anger. Don't take road rage out. Don't do something that you know that you shouldn't do, okay? But it's okay to be angry. And just like the slide here shows, everybody knows on Facebook, emojis are a real big thing, right? So many, of you right now are somewhere on the emotional chart or the emoji chart. On Facebook and all these things, you put, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling, these are an emotional emojis. We all are going through some state of emotion right now. Okay, so we're feeling somewhere between depression, anger, frustration, and feeling overwhelmed. Okay, not too many of us probably right now are feeling joyful or any type of state of bliss. But if I was to turn around and set my emotional GPS for a destination, I think I would want to set my destination for being joyful and having bliss in my life and feeling happy. Okay, overall happy about my life and about where I'm going. So that is, but right now, most of us probably are not there. We may have days, good days where we feel happy, but we're going to fall in between those emotional emojis chart there between depression, anger, frustration, and also feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelmed is a big one because in many cases we have so many emotions all at the same time. Okay, would you agree to that? I mean, I know myself, over 20 years, especially being lost in the fog, gosh, I can wake up in one morning, feel this way. By breakfast time, I feel this way. By lunch, I'm about, oh my God, which way do I go? I have so many things I got to do, and this and this and this. I just can't stay focused on any one thing. By the time dinner's ready, I'm looking at my wife saying, what's for dinner? What's for this? And the kids haven't done their chores. And then by the time it's bedtime, it's like, what did I do? I didn't do a damn thing all day long. But I was busy, and I feel emotionally wrecked. I feel emotionally drained because I've been overwhelmed, okay? And so part of this GPS, emotional GPS, is getting on track, getting those feelings under control, and making those stops and know where you're going, okay? So, this takes time, all right? It takes time. It doesn't, gosh, this stuff I wish I knew 24 years ago. But then it probably was given to me, and it went in one ear and out the other. I think that's why so many people, we go through all the stages of grief, and then we revisit those stages again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay? Not knowing, how to stop the cycle of all these stages, which are just emotions that we're going through. We stop over in these different stages for shorter visits, but we keep coming back. One of the things I wanted to do is stop coming back. Those are destinations I do not wish to go to. I don't want to go to the North Pole in the middle of winter. I want to go someplace nice where it's sunny, warm beaches, all these good things. But it's so hard to go there, when you're stuck at the North Pole or somewhere in between that, okay? So I hope you see, how you can just, by making a small shift in your emotional GPS, you've been able to make that shift, you feel a little bit better, and so you don't feel so stuck. Because when you're depressed and you feel lost in the fog and you don't know where to turn, you have that feeling of being stuck. And if you can learn how to just take that, and I'm using this as an example right now, but if you can take that and put that into something that makes you angry, then you've made a shift from depression to anger. And then from that standpoint, you feel a little better because now you're not so depressed. You're really pissed off about something. And so now you don't feel so stuck because you're pissed off, you're angry about something. Guess what you do? You take action on what it is that you're angry about. So if I got angry for my dog crapping on the floor, guess what? I'm going to take care of the dog. I'm also probably going to clean up the dog mess, or I'm going to call my wife to do it. Or maybe I'm going to turn around and clean up our grandbaby's mess or something. But at the same time, I've been able to make that shift. And, now it may be short-lived, and then once I take care of that problem, I'm not angry anymore, and I may slip back into some depression and start feeling depressed again. Well, then all it is just, again, same thing. Just get into, and make that shift into anger or something there, that upsets you to the point where you take action. One of the biggest cures, for your grief is to get moving, which is to take action. Okay? But when we feel depressed, sad, we typically don't take any action. And then a lot of times the action that we do take, we find out later in life that it wasn't really the best decision that I made. And so maybe I should have done something else. Hence why I lost my business, I lost my marriage, went bankrupt not once but twice. Quit jobs every time I was on the verge of anything successful. I found out this is not what I'm looking for. This is not what makes me happy. And so I sabotaged it. I blew it up. And, consequently it cost me a lot. It cost me relationships and everything else. So we're not here for all that part of my story, because I think a lot of us can probably relate because we have similar stories in our lives. Okay? So, again, I come back to that direction sign. Hope or despair. So set your GPS. Where do you wish to go? Okay? You now have a new focus for where you want to go. And you know how to get there. Okay? So you really know how to get there. There's going to be some twists and turns, some hills and valleys along the way, but you can make these subtle shifts. Okay? So what does this all mean to you? Okay? Well, you have a focus. So just as the slide shows here online, the focus. The picture's all blurred around that. You look through the lens looks clearer. Okay? So you have focus. You begin to have clarity in your life. Okay? You now see what you're reaching for. It's just like a couple weeks ago when I talked about most of us look, in a rearview mirror. We look behind us where we've been. Okay? That's why I said in the beginning of the call here tonight that's why we're not concerned about that question, where we've been. We know where we've been. I know where I've been for the last 20 years. I like to forget a lot of it. But, but it's part of my life. So I accept it. Okay? I've forgiven myself. I've been able to release it. And by doing so, I now can put my focus on something else. And I can create a new plan. Okay? So you now have clarity and you can see clearer. And now the fog has started to lift. Okay? It's like, look at it this way. If you're driving a road, if you were out on a road where you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you due to the fog, okay, you'd probably pull over, stop your car, or you'd drive really, really slow. Am I right? So in this case, and now the fog is lifted, it's a little clearer, guess what? Especially if it's a road that you've been on. You've traveled this road many times over and over and over again. So now you can sit here and say, I know my way, but I'm going to go rather cautiously, and I'm going to take my time because it is still foggy, but I can see in front of me a little better, and I have a good idea where I'm at. So, because, again, if you're making these subtle shifts from depression to anger, each time you're getting a little more focus, you're getting a little more clarity. You're dealing with the issues one at a time. You're dealing with these things one at a time. And then you begin to realize and you take note of how you feel. Begin to journal that down and write it down so you don't forget about how you feel about that. And then you can turn around and come back and revisit that. Okay? And, but, most people would say that they don't like it when you're depressed. Am I right? And when you're angry, what do you think they would say? So when you're depressed, people don't really like it when you're depressed. They're sad. They ask you what's the matter, what's wrong. But when you're angry, what do they say to you? What do you think they would say? Okay? Think about that question just for a minute. I'm going to take a drink of water. All right? All right. So, when I ask this question to my wife, she knows exactly what the answer is. Okay? And when you're depressed, you go away. So you're not a problem to them anymore, right? I look at my situation with my ex-wife. We both grieved very differently. She's depressed. I'm depressed. It was the lack of communication or the unwillingness to communicate my feelings. And on her side, it was the lack of communication from her to me and her unwillingness to communicate her feelings to me. For whatever reason, whether or not I was upset about something, I didn't feel like talking about it, or I was afraid it was going to upset her. The point of it is I didn't do it, so we went away. We didn't bother anybody. Okay? And nor when we were depressed, nobody bothered us. Right? So think about it. When you're feeling depressed, things like that, you have family and friends that probably aren't around a whole lot. Okay? It doesn't really help you out when you're feeling sad and depressed. When you're angry, okay, what do they say to you? Well, when you're angry, you're in their face. Is that right? You let them know you're pissed off about something, you're angry about something. And they don't like that either. But you know what? It gets their attention. And when you get angry at somebody or you get angry about something, it gets it off your plate. It gets you off, it gets you out of there. They don't like it when you're angry. They don't like it when you're depressed, but when you're depressed, like I said, you go away. You're not in their way. You're not in their face. So you're not a problem for them. And when I'm talking about this here, I'm talking about my spouse, my wife at the time. We're divorced, but we went along 8 years of our life like this. Okay? With our daughter, we wound up in a lawsuit. We wound up in all kinds of issues and problems, all this legal stuff, everything that goes on and went on for years. Okay? So when it's all said and done, what do? Well, you get depressed all over again. But then you don't want to talk about that day years ago. Couldn't get angry at some people. We got people fired. We made some changes. We did some good things. What am I going to get angry at now? Well, consequently wound up getting angry at each other. And that wasn't necessarily a good thing either. Okay? That's for a whole nother discussion. But let me ask you this. Depression. Going from depression to anger is not that big of a leap to make. Would you agree? Pretty simple to do. Pretty simple to get angry at any point in time if you want to get angry, right? But a leap from depression to joyfulness in your life is a quantum leap. It's almost impossible. Okay? Just like when I said just here a little while ago, I would like to travel from Ohio to California in a matter of minutes or a few hours. I don't want to take 3 days to get there. But for me to go from Ohio to California in a matter of, one day or less than a day unless I'm flying on an airplane. But if I even want to do it much quicker than that, just kind of like step out of my door, my room here in the office, and then go down the hall and open the door there, and I'm in California, then, that would be a quantum leap. It's the same thing. It's almost impossible to do, okay? To be able to live your life where you have, you're happy most of the time. You have joyfulness in your life. So it's much easier to make small shifts. Make small shifts, small steps, and small stopovers as you go along the way. Okay? Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense, everybody. So, so I'm eager to really begin to talk to you about where you are and where you want to go. Okay? So let me kind of ask you something here. Let me find my notes. Okay? So, if you're feeling, well, let me say it this way. If you're feeling, when you really, really want something in your life and you really, really, really don't know how to get it, okay, you feel that really, really, we'll throw in several more reallys, awful, okay, that you can't get it. So the more awful you feel, okay, that's when you begin to feel stuck, and that's when you feel depressed, okay, because you really, really, really want something, but you really, really, really don't know how to get it, so you become stuck. And when we lose a loved one in life, what we really, really want, at least I can speak for myself, but then most of the people I talk to, what we really, really want is we want our life to go back to the way it was the day before we lost our loved one. But because we know that we really, really, really can't go back there, that really, really, really can't happen, we feel really, really bad and awful, and then we feel depressed and we feel stuck because I can't get there from here. I can't get there. Okay? So you have to set your emotional GPS for the trip that you've got to make, which requires change. Requires a lot of hard work. Okay? But the biggest thing is I want you to understand that it's not that hard to do. Going back to that last slide I talked about, to make that shift from depression to anger is not a big leap, but to make that leap to where you really want to go, which you want to be happy again, but you have to understand you can't go backwards to be happy. You got to go forwards. That becomes a quantum leap to be able to just do it. The problem is we don't realize it's going to take us a long time. A long time. For many of us, it's going to take us years. And for many of us, like myself, it took me over 20 years to learn some of these things. Okay? The thing is I learned them, but I didn't apply them. I never really understood them. Okay? Nobody was talking to me about that. They were just talking to, my counselors and therapists were talking to me about that day and why, my mommy didn't potty train me a particular way or something like that, some Freudian thing. Okay? Had nothing to do with anything about the way I feel and how bad I feel as a father. Okay? One of the things that, I don't bash on this. I'm not bashing, okay? But one of the things, I belong to a lot of different Facebook groups, okay? And not because I want to tell my story, but I want to read what other people are talking about. I want to understand how people feel today. Because, when I lost my daughter in 1993, Facebook wasn't around. The internet really wasn't around. I think you had dial-up and AOL and stuff like that, but not like what we have today, where everything's just at a fingertip. I've got a call going on here. I've got a PowerPoint presentation online. I got Facebook Live going on here. In 1993, we had none of this stuff. Okay, none of this was. So what I had was a telephone that was on the wall, and I think I had a cell phone which is in a bag, like a bag phone that cost like $5,000, and I had a beeper on my pocket. And that was how I stayed connected, to the people, to the world, which really was kind of nice compared to the way we're connected today. But I belong to several Facebook groups, and one of the things is And I read a lot of posts and I read a lot of things out there on some of these Facebook groups, and it's really sad because these groups have a lot of good information, but they don't put it out there. People are sharing their stories, sharing their feelings and emotions. That's good because you don't feel alone when you talk to people like that. I know that was where I was at. I didn't feel so alone when people shared their story. And I don't mean to make this sound mean or hateful, but sometimes when I heard some stories, when people, I would be in a grief group or a session, and somebody come in who's new, who just lost a child, last month or a few months ago, sometimes I felt better because I knew I was further along in my journey, but I felt bad for them. But to hear their story was also very sad, and it made me feel better because I wasn't where they are at. Okay, so I'm reading a lot of these Facebook posts, and and so many people are stuck on that day, stuck at that particular point in time in their life, and there's no advice, there's nothing given to them of steps and things, and or where to go or what they can do to make a change. Okay, that's why I was lost in the fog for 20 years. Nobody took that time. They didn't care. Okay? My therapist could care less whether or not I got better, because as long as I stayed stuck on where I was at, he kept getting paid. Normally, somebody doesn't do a job and you don't get the results you want, you fire them, you get rid of them. But somehow, when it comes to grief, and it comes to loss and depression and PTSD and all this stuff, they just want to medicate you. They just want to keep you where you're at, so that way you keep paying them. And I don't want to bash on them. They have their place. They have a purpose, and it's good purpose, and I've used it, but I didn't stay on it. It's kind of like getting stuck on welfare and living off the government and living off something and saying, you know what, I'm just going to stay here, and I'm not ever going to go to get a job. I'll let the government take care of me, or let my mother and father take care of me, and you just settle where you are. That's why when people tell me, well, you just have to learn to cope with it, I began to ask that question. No, I don't. There's more to life than just coping. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox here. So, anyways, but let's keep moving on here. But I am eager to talk to you. Find out where you want to go and how you plan to get there. Okay, and so I'm willing to talk to you. Nothing is off the table. Okay, the reason why I say nothing's off the table is because I already know what your questions are. All right, you have to understand. I got 24 years of experience dealing with this stuff. Okay, the ins and outs, and I've been through every little thing and situation you can possibly imagine personally in my life. And so, I know what your questions that you may want to ask. You see, I never ask in my life, I never ask somebody a question that I don't already know the answer to. Think about it with your kids. Okay, you already know the answer. You know who ate the ice cream out of the refrigerator. So, but you're just going to see if one of them will kind of snitch on the other, kind of help you with your problem a little bit. But I already know the answer. Well, this is kind of the same way, but nothing's off the table. Willing to talk about, whatever is your state of mind. Okay, because let me step back here just a second and put my notes here, because I had something wrote down and I wanted to bring that up because I felt that was important. Here we go. Yeah. And because one of the things is when I'm talking about, there's basically 3 key points here. There's 5 steps when I'm working with somebody, but there's 3 key points that I think are really important here. Number 1 is state of mind. Number 2 is focus. And number 3 is meaning. Okay. State of mind, we really kind of covered a lot here tonight. Being depressed and going to anger, okay? And then focus, we've covered a lot. What are we focusing on? Remember, what we focus on is what we get out of life. So what are we focusing on, okay? But then we want to turn around and begin to put meaning to what it is, okay? What that is what are you holding on to that you are giving meaning to, okay, in your life? And sometimes what we're giving meaning to, that we're giving our power to it, which disempowers us, which creates a conflict in our life. Okay? And these become our meanings. These are what we really rest everything on. Okay? So, I just kind of felt I wanted to throw that in there. It kind of goes in a little bit of what I'm talking about. Why I say, I already know the questions that most people might want to ask me. But, if you make that emotional shift, okay, if we get together and spend some time on the phone, okay, and I can help you make that emotional shift where you feel confident that you can get to where you want to go after you reset your emotional GPS, all right? And you really are able to do this at any point in time in your life to be able to make that change and make that emotional change in your life and make small changes and take small actions, okay, for big problems. These are just like baby steps. You're taking small actions, in setting your emotional GPS, okay? Then my work is done, okay? You're able to do this. You're able to do it on your own. You're able to do it at any point in time. And, the thing about it is I think I have some notes here on it, but you see here. Nope. Anyways, let me go back here. See what I had something wrote down. I wanted to, yeah, there you go. That reminds me. So if you're able to make this shift, so this is the way I want you to think about it. Okay, if you can go from anger, okay, depression to anger, and be able to go from anger to frustration, and frustration to hopefulness, okay, then you can go anywhere as you want to go. Okay, and it's not hard. Not a big distance between the stops. So if I'm going to set my emotional GPS and I'm going to take a trip, I'm going to start off in the city of depression, and I'm going to go to the city of anger. I'm going to stop by, at the village or the town of frustration, and I'm going to spend some time and see the sights in these in these places, but and I'm going to experience everything that all these things have to give me, so I can learn from. I can write it down in my journal for my trip, and I can keep track of it. And then I'm going to turn around and leave the village or town of frustration. We're going to travel to our destination here for today. Will be hopefulness. Okay, and I get to where now I begin to have some hope in my life, and I can see light at the end of the tunnel. And then I realize that my next stop is joyfulness and in the city of bliss. Okay, and then at that point in time, I'm going to live life with meaning and purpose, and feel empowered to take control of my life, and empowered to be able to help others also find their way through, the fog. Okay. So it's just little tiny steps, okay? So I hope this makes sense to you here tonight. There's so much more to this, and so we're going to continue this with our call next week, but the call next week is going to be more about how do I take my power back? How do I get my power back and live my life empowered? Because a lot of these steps kind of go hand in hand with that, okay? But there's a few other things that we have to understand along the way as we learn and we get through these emotional state of minds to where we're going to put our focus, because where we're putting our focus is what is really taking our power. It's kind of like along the trip, thinking of it as a toll road. We're paying the toll along the way because we're focused on something, and so part of the payment is we're paying with our power. We're giving it away. In most cases, we're giving it away for free. We don't even know we're doing it. And so that sometimes allows us to also be stuck and not be able to get up and have the energy to do the things we do each and every day. So, hey, with that being said, guys, contact me. My email is rick@afatherslost.com with a time and day that works best for you. We can have that talk so we can set your emotional GPS. Make those changes. Make the subtle changes. There's lots of tools and lots of steps that we can do that I have, and exercises that you can do also to help with the shift in these changes. Okay, as you go along with each and every day. But with that being said, we've been on here for about 50 minutes, so we're going to start to wrap this up here tonight. And I really enjoy each and every one of you being here. If you've got any questions or anything that you want me to answer, I'll stick around for a minute here, but go ahead and ask the question here on Facebook, or if you got a question online here, just shoot it there. If you're on the phone, hit *6 and you can become unmuted and you can answer your question that way too. If you're online, go ahead and put your question in the chat box. You'll see up top the little bubble with the little arrow there. You can click on that and you can send a chat message to me with your question. Otherwise, shoot me an email at rick@afatherslost.com with your questions. If that's something you want to do a little more personally, you don't want me to address it here. I'm also looking at doing something, adding an additional call here, okay? Because I've been getting some questions from people, different things like that, but I want to do a call strictly, you could be online call. There will be no PowerPoint presentation with that call or anything like that, but it's more or less a question and answer call. If you've got questions about anything that how you're feeling, what's going on in your life, you want some answers, we'll do our best to be able to get you those answers. But the other part of that is I want to create a community with this call where we can bring people together, because we all have information. We all have personal experiences and life lessons that each and every one of us have learned and been in a situation that can help somebody else out that might have a question, because you may have already been there. You may have already answered that question. Or it might be something that you're dealing with right now. So this is, this is about a community, not something where you post a post and let people comment. This is a community that'll be live. If you want to, we can talk about it. If you want me to record it and post it on the website, that's fine. Or we can record it, and those people that want to be part of the call, we can get an email address and we can email the recording to each person so you can listen to it, and we don't have to make it public to everybody, okay? Because I understand a lot of times things are personal and everything. Okay? Yeah, I just got a message. Greg, not a problem. I will shoot you an email. Thanks. I got your email, and I will shoot you over that copy of of the PowerPoint here, but I'm in the process. I've got the copy of the PowerPoint, but I am going to create a workbook out of these PowerPoints also, where you can go back, re-listen, and maybe take notes and things with the PowerPoint slides if they kind of go along with it. But I do have that. Today's PowerPoint is on a PDF. If you want a copy of that, I can send that to you. And then we will go ahead and do our best to get the recording up on this, have the recording up by Friday. Hopefully the recording on the PowerPoint worked out great. Last week it didn't. We just had audio. So hopefully we'll have the video and the audio, both the MP3 and MP4, on the website here within the next 24 to 48 hours. Hey, with that being said, guys, I appreciate your time. You guys are all wonderful. I just want to, give them my blessings, and anything that I can do to help, I'm here. I want to reach out to you if you need help, and so I send you much love, and you're not alone. So, just reach out to me if you need something. So you guys are awesome. You guys have a good night. We will talk to you later. Okay? Good night.